Okay, what's going on, Rafi? Thanks for joining me here again on Vonvo.com. Actually, you were with Alex last time, but not a big deal. Um, we appreciate you coming on to share your opinion about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I wanted to, although you might have, when you spoke with Alex, you might have given a brief background of yourself. If you don't mind, would you mind just giving once again just a quick background of yourself, where you're from right now, occupation, etc.?
Sure. I was born in Chicago, or in a suburb of Chicago. I grew up there, spent most of my life there. I moved to Israel about 6 years ago, and when I graduated college, my parents had moved there a few years before. My parents also lived in Jerusalem, and my siblings. And I work in biotechnology, making medical diagnostic tests, designing software for medical tests. And I don't know. I've been married for 2 years. We just had a baby, like a few months ago. The baby's like 2.5 months old.
Cool.
And, I've been working on some different peace projects. One in particular was the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, which was like sort of a model parliament for Israel and Palestine together, like a European Union style parliament. See what kind of things that, if you get Israelis and Palestinians together in a project like that, what kind of things we would come up with and what we could all agree on, that we could vote for.
Very cool. Very cool. And so, just to ease into things, what exactly was it that got you, so heavily involved in, this conflict? Was there any sort of event that occurred in your life, or?
Well, I mean, I lived here in 2000. I went to school like a lot of Jewish kids from America. They go to yeshiva for a year and they study in
Yeah.
Israel. And so I was in the old city of Jerusalem at the same time that they had this the second Intifada broke out, and there were people who got shot and stabbed, and stuff was getting blown up all over me. And it was sort of, I sort of realized that there's a serious problem going on here. It's not, as a kid, I really didn't understand much about the conflict. I'd come here like in the summer and stuff, and all I would see, you'd see Arabs and Jews walking around. I didn't know there was a big issue, and like I wondered why some of the Arabs had blue license plates, and people said, "Oh, those are Jordanian license plates." I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." I didn't really make so much of a connection as there was because I'd heard there was wars, in the '60s and in the '70s and stuff, and I figured that had all been sorted out. But then I came here as an 18-year-old, and all of a sudden there's people blowing up, buses in my neighborhood and blowing up cafes. And I'm like, there's a serious issue going on. We should try to live normally and have a peaceful relationship. And I don't know, like when I was in university, I started a project to bring Jews and Muslims together. I read the Quran, I reread the Tanakh, like the Jewish Bible. I wanted to get like a perspective and see if there was like some sort of religious core to the conflict, and I really didn't see that much difference. There's actually like more in common between Judaism and Islam than really like most other religions. So it just seems sort of bizarre that these two groups that are so similar and have really similar cultures are like fighting with each other over like a tiny piece of land, and they can't find a reasonable way to live there together normally. And so I thought, try to encourage people to do that and get involved and meet different people. And I feel like there's a lot of fear of both groups from each other, and like that fear starts to lead to paranoia, and and eventually they start hating each other and start thinking like, oh my God, the Zionists want to control the world and kill everybody, and everyone's like, oh, Muslims are terrorists, and eventually people get like carried away, and it gets not really practical.
No, great.
Try to bring things down to a realistic level.
Right, and I think you've got an interesting perspective. Max, wait. Okay, I think that's. Oh, Omar's having technical. Okay, so it looks like Omar's in. Um, and first off, that's some really interesting perspective. I didn't know about that beforehand. In terms of you having that sort of insight into the situation. So that's great, and that makes you even more valuable to have on Vonvo. Let me just Alex his Facebook profile, and we'll just keep going. Okay. 5:45. Facebook. Here. Okay, so Rafi, yesterday, I thought the topic of discussing whether or not Israel's an apartheid state would be interesting to try and continue tackling again. Before we jump into that, and I kind of also want to ask it just because I thought Miko gave some interesting perspective on that subject, and so I think that there's some, there's definitely some follow-up questions and things that can be, dug deep, looked into a little bit deeper. One of the questions in the text chat though just asked, and I think it's an interesting question maybe to start off with though. Have you had any success bringing the two sides together from your work?
Sure. I mean, I've participated in various conferences and stuff, and Israelis and Palestinians show up and are interested in some kind of peaceful resolution. They like the various concepts of projects I've been involved with, like the Brit Yisrael Palestine, the idea of a federation of Israel and Palestine, and also the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. That's sort of an idea, like how to have two states but sort of share a small piece of land together and make that viable and functional. And so people, there is interest. I mean, unfortunately, not enough. The politics is very skewed in a lot of directions. There's a big anti-normalization movement amongst the Palestinians. They don't want to interact with Israelis, or go to peaceful things. They'd rather the Israelis change their government and get them to change their policy and stuff. And as far as changing government policy, there's a lot of objections by mainstream Israelis are well, we can't, we got security is the most important thing, and Palestinians have been so hard to deal with, and there's been all these wars and conflicts, and so it's hard to get through. You talk to a lot of Israelis. I mean, some obviously there's some more liberal people out there. They're yeah, that's great. Let's go, do Israeli-Palestinian joint projects. A good friend of mine runs this project where he brings Israelis and Palestinians on trips. Like tourism of Israeli cities and of Palestinian cities, a joint tourism thing, and various other projects, and and people still attend that sort of stuff, but not in a major way as it ideally should be if people wanted to work to get peace here. But at the same time, I understand the Palestinians are in a tough situation from their perspective. Their homeland's been sort of taken over by the Israelis, and and then they built all these settlements and stuff, and there's checkpoints, and they're how are we going to negotiate with them? How are we going to talk to them when they're doing horrible things to us? Sort of entrapped us in our own country.
Right, and so I mean that brings up a few interesting points. Ultimately, and we'll kind of now move into the whole apartheid state idea. I mean, ultimately, do you think that it's really the root cause, so for example, something that Miko was saying yesterday is the root cause of why Palestinians are as upset as they are and maybe aren't interacting with Israelis like you're saying they are, is because of the idea of this, it's strictly because of them feeling occupied and, them therefore having this whole resistance movement building up. And I wanted to ask you, do you think it's as much as that, where it's encompassing the Palestinians as a whole, or do you think it's more of let's say you just mentioned, politically there seems to be a huge disconnect on each side, and that's what's preventing anything from occurring?
I mean, it's a combination of both. The disconnect is sort of, especially from the Palestinian side, built on their whole narrative of, the Zionists came here, they wanted to build a state, and it didn't work out peacefully. Like in America, we have Thanksgiving, right? And we celebrate how the Pilgrims came here, seeking religious freedom and stuff, and they met the Indians, and they all had this big dinner together, and everything worked out happily ever after. But that's not really how America worked out, and unfortunately, that's not the reality of how Israel worked out. The Zionists came here, they were okay, we'll build a state, and Arabs will still live here, and we'll be fine. We'll just bring in a large number of Jews, and we'll make this country that we wanted. And there was totally resistance from the other side, who felt that they were going to get pushed off their land and live a lifestyle that they weren't interested in. And and then after the war broke out, there was 750,000 people were displaced from their homes on the Palestinian side, and then a huge number of Jews were displaced from all the surrounding Arab countries and came there. So there's this whole conflict idea on both sides that there was this total war, and then the Jews won their state, and they all came there, and then the Arabs could go to the rest of the world, and the local Palestinians are that's not working for me. My grandfather lived in outside Jerusalem, and now his house is either destroyed or having some Israeli family living in it. So it's not just it's also the small things. I mean, in the same sense, I mean, you could think about that in history, but at the same time, when you go outside your neighborhood, you have to walk through an Israeli checkpoint, and there's soldiers around, and you don't feel safe where you go. I mean, you're gonna connect the two things. Oh well, historically there was this great injustice of the Israelis building us on top of us, and then uh, on the other hand, right now today I have soldiers like down the block from me, and that's making me uncomfortable, and I feel like my freedoms are being impinged on. So it's sort of the two things together. And same like from the Israeli side. I mean, there's this historical perspective that Israel wanted to set up the state, and then 5 Arab nations invaded and tried to like kill them all in a total war, and the Israelis won, and then there were several other wars where they were attacked by the Arabs, and then even now today there's like there were suicide bombings and terrorist attacks, and these days there's less suicide bombings. Now it's the Palestinians are shooting rockets at us. What are you kidding me? These people aren't our friends. They don't want to be our friends. And the Palestinians will say the same thing. Like, what do you mean the Israelis don't want to be our friends? There's maybe a couple of nice hippie Israelis, but most of them are bloodthirsty and want to kick us all off our land and what have you.
So my question would be though is like you're giving each of those two sides of the story. You're obviously in Israel. You don't seem like a bloodthirsty individual.
I'm hearing you so well.
Do you hear me now? Do you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, you can make my volume a little higher if you put your mouse over my screen. If you put it over my face, there should be a little microphone level, and you can make it higher.
I got it. Okay, cool. I got it.
Okay, do you hear me now?
I feel like there was like a little bit. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I think there was a little bit of a lag.
Okay, no problem. What I was going to say is, so, speaking to you, you don't seem like a bloodthirsty individual. Obviously, I've spoken to Palestinians who don't really seem like a bloodthirsty individuals. What then, is it ultimately, do you see, like, you being in Israel and kind of having, being from America, so you kind of have like an independent perspective, do you see it more as like the extremists inside of Israel, like I forget what the political party's called, but it's like really right wing apparently, and then like and then would you say it's really some do you hear me now? Rafi, do you hear me?
Maybe I should turn off my camera. Try that.
Yeah, if you turn off your camera, your audio, it might get a little less laggy.
Okay, I'll try that for a little bit.
Okay, just click turn off camera.
Yeah, doesn't seem to want to do it.
No?
No, I'm still here in the image. That's okay. So I mean, there's like some extremist parties that are like, but there's the fact that they've been there for 30, 40 years already and set up all these towns, and they don't want the government to come kick their own people out of their homes, and then and then there's more extreme fanatics that are like there shouldn't be any Palestinian state, and and that sort of thing, and then there's fanatics on the left who say we should clear out all the Israeli settlers like immediately. And it has a lot to do with what goes on with the settlers, really, on how you feel. It's not so much like right wing and left wing politics like a normal country.
Right.
It's a bit bizarre, but it's not just the extremists. It's really like mainstream Israeli opinion is, in favor of, in theory, some kind of 2-state solution, but they sort of want it under their terms. They would want to keep the major settlement blocks and stuff like that, and still have rights to go over to the other side. Well, at the same time, the Palestinians would want something similar. They would want the right to be able to come to our side, and really both sides would prefer a solution where they were friendly and they could like travel around, and you could have sort of a peaceful situation here. But it's hard to really get people to that because of all the fears they have built up of each other.
Right. Okay, 1 second. It looks like we might have Omar coming in. Hopefully his video loads up this time. Hey, Omar, do you hear me? Omar, are you there? You don't hear him, do you, Rafi?
I hear you, Omar.
You do hear him?
Okay, cool. I'll turn him up too.
You hear Omar or no? I don't hear him.
I hear Omar, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, Omar. Yeah.
I don't hear Omar. What's he say? Is he? I don't hear him. Shit. Let me see. Is he coming in clearly for you?
Yeah, I see. I don't see your picture. I hear your voice though.
Do you hear Omar though? Fine.
Yeah, I hear him fine.
Why can't I hear Omar though? Let me. Do you mind if I leave the room and come right back in and just see if I hear him then?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. 1 second.
Sure.
I'm from West Bank, Rafi.
Oh, cool.
What about you?
I'm from Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
Alud. Yeah.
Well, Rafi, I haven't been in Jerusalem since 11 years. Your government, of course.
That sucks, man. I really, it's a real sad thing to hear when I talk to Palestinians. Like, my dream is to go to Jerusalem. I'm like, that's my dream too. And why can't we all live it?
Hey, Omar, do you hear me?
That's right.
Oh.
Okay, Max, are you in now?
Yeah, I hear you fine. I hear Rafi fine also. Do you hear me, Omar? Does he not hear me now?
Yes, I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you great. So can we... Okay, great. I hear you fine.
This is great.
Sure.
Okay. And I'm really sorry for the cam.
No.
Couldn't work it out.
No problem at all. I'm so happy you were able to get into the room. So Omar, just to catch you up, Rafi and I, we've been speaking for about 10, 15 minutes or so. We were beginning to talk a little bit about whether or not Israel is an apartheid state and any sort of solutions. But before we continue that discussion, would you mind just telling the audience, where you're from and a little bit about yourself?
No problem, Max. Well, I am a Palestinian living in Tubas City, north of West Bank, Palestine. I am just a university student, and this is my last semester, and I'm doing all this for my country, Palestine.
Great. And you said are you a journalist? Is that correct?
You get that, right?
Yeah. I got that fine. Did you?
No, I'm not a journalist. I'm a student.
Just a student. Okay. Got it. Okay, so Omar, I think I just heard you say before, that you haven't been to Jerusalem in 11 years. Is that correct?
That's right, Max.
So,
I haven't because there are many checkpoints, and you have to cross many barriers in order to get to Jerusalem, and you're not allowed to do so. It's not easy at all.
Can you give us a little bit? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that entire process so that we understand exactly what you mean by all of that, and anyone who watches this video understands what you mean by that?
Of course. First, I have to go to Nablus. I have to go to cross Huwara checkpoint. I have to cross Za'tara checkpoint, and you might have problems crossing these checkpoints because you are a Palestinian in the first place. And you have to go through Ramallah, and then you are not allowed to enter Jerusalem at all. There is the apartheid wall. You need a special certificate from the Israeli government to go and enter Jerusalem. And even if you did, Max, you just can't enter the campus, Al-Aqsa campus. You can't do that. You have to be over 45 years old.
Right now, so is there any particular reason why, for you yourself, there might be a struggle? Is there anything happen with you personally of why,
No, no, no,
it's been
no,
difficult
no.
for?
I didn't have any particular issues with the Israelis so far. I didn't. But it's, let me say, it's a major punishment for all the Palestinians, not just me.
Right now, what? So I've heard, a few different stories about having to have a blue, I think it's similar like identification card in order to
Yes, yes,
cross those borders. Is it with one
that's
of
right.
is it with one of those ID cards that it makes it easier? And what's the process to get one of those ID cards?
Well, this blue identity max is given to the Israeli citizens, not the West Bank or Gaza Strip citizens. We are not allowed to have this identity. An American can come from Chicago and a Jewish can come from Chicago or from Russia or from Germany and can go to Jerusalem easily, but we can't. Although we are the owners of this land, we have been living here since thousands of years.
Right, right. Rafi, is there? Do you know about the
Sure.
Do you know about the process that Omar is describing for us, and what
Yeah,
that's all about?
absolutely. If you live in Jerusalem, if you're an Arab who lives in Jerusalem and you're not a citizen of Israel, you can get a certain kind of ID card that means that you're a resident of Jerusalem. And from there, it's like you're an Israeli citizen because they were in theory offered Israeli citizenship if you live in Jerusalem and you're a Palestinian. So because Israel sort of, according to its own laws, annexed Jerusalem, so they consider it like an incorporated territory, like you have in America. Whereas the Palestinian territories is sort of it's a whole balagan. If they've segmented into three different sections, like the West, there's Area A, B, and C. And areas A and B are basically run by the Palestinians, though Area B has Israeli security. And Area C is managed by the Israeli army, which is a sort of a weird situation. And so if you're an Arab who lives in Area C, you can't come to Jerusalem unless you get a visa that has to be approved by the Israeli army.
So I mean, I'm sorry.
One more thing to add, Rafi and Max.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Omar.
Yes. I just want to add one more point that even if you are Palestinian and you have the blue Israeli identity card, you can't get into Jerusalem unless you are 45 years old, most of the times, especially to get inside Al-Aqsa.
Yeah.
I'm sure you didn't know this before. I don't know.
I mean, I understand. I thought it was 40 years old, but I understand the age thing for getting in Al-Aqsa. Although I'm not sure. I mean, I know people that are younger, and I've seen them like go there and stuff, and I've seen pictures of them. So I'm not sure what the rules are all the time. And also, if you're a Palestinian who already lives in Jerusalem, then you can in theory go there. But I don't know how the age range is. If it's every day that they stop people from going in. I don't know. I mean, I'm Jewish. I don't go on top of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Like we don't, because it's like to us, it's the holiest site in the world, and we're not supposed to enter unless you've been specially purified and what have you. Yes.
Rafi, I am sure as a Jew, you know very well that the Ottoman Muslims, have protected the Jews during the Holocaust thing. You know this?
I'm sure. They happen in lots of places. The Arabs were overall nicer to the Jews than the Christians were in Europe, for sure.
That's right. And the Jews, Muslims, and Christians lived in Jerusalem peacefully before the creation of what's called Israel.
I'm aware of that. I mean, but it was under a different situation. I mean, like the Israelis showed up with hundreds of thousands of Jews here, and it totally changed the dynamic.
Yeah. Maybe the situations changed, Rafi.
I would be living here now, and everything would be cool. What?
So I want to ask.
What I wanted to say.
Yeah, go ahead, Omar. Keep going.
No. it's okay. You can ask your question.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you something, Omar, because I think it's an interesting, topic to dig into right now. So, how old are you, Omar? Just by the way, how old are you?
I am 24 years old, 24 and a half,
Okay,
turning 25 soon.
so you're 24 years old, 25, almost turning 25. I'm 23, and
Yes.
Rafi's, Rafi, how old are you?
31.
31. Okay, so
31.
so Omar, my
31.
quick question to you because I want to continue digging deep into this. Ultimately, on your end,
Please go ahead.
you have no problems with any particular Jews. You have no problem. You're obviously you're very upset
You mean with particular Jews?
yeah, like you've never participated in any sort of like.
When you have.
My question is you've never participated in any sort of like.
I do participate. I
Omar, my question is
like what? I didn't.
Yeah, I'll ask you the question now. You've never participated in any sort of extremist, terrorist actions by any means, correct?
No, I didn't. Thanks.
And you're just simply trying to live a normal life as a 25-year-old, just being able to travel freely throughout the whole country of Israel, right?
Yes. Let me say it in other words. I am trying to go to Jerusalem, to go to Java, to go to Haifa, because those are Palestinian cities and they are occupied by the Israeli Zionists.
So
it's my right.
Omar, if
yes,
if Israel would allow the restrictions on traveling and remove these checkpoints, which are pretty much, it seems like, worthless for people like you who have no problem at all, like you're not an extremist by any means, you're just a normal Palestinian individual, like would you feel a lot better about your country's situation and you and your family's situation if these sort of restrictions were released?
No, Max. I wouldn't feel better because there are 5 million Palestinian refugees waiting to get back to their lands, and there are 4,500 Palestinian prisoners. 6 of them are on hunger strike since more than months. I want the refugees to go back to their lands and houses, and I want all these prisoners out of the Israeli prisons. I want my homeland back. This is my right. It's the Jews who used to live in Russia or America or Europe do not have the right to take all these lands and houses and to prevent the Palestinians from their own houses. It's not their right.
Rafi, do you have anything that's coming up from this, from Omar's points here that you want to address?
I mean, sure. I saw someone ask the question if I was a Zionist. I mean, I try to break down like supporting Israel in 2 steps. One is supporting the country Israel in 2012. As it exists as a country of like 7 million people, and like should the country Israel have made it 65 years ago in the way it was, and like yes, man.
Let me ask you one question, please. Allow me to ask you one question, please. Why do you support Israel? Or the ethnic cleansing it due to the Palestinian? Or what for all the ugly massacres Israel did in Gaza? Why do you support such a country?
I support.
It's forbidden, Rafi. It's forbidden in the Torah for the Jews to have a state, and you know that.
I don't agree with that position on the Jews having a state, but I mean the Torah doesn't really specify 1 state or 2 state or what the deal was. It just said the Jewish people, or at least the children of Israel, the Bnei Israel, that they should live in this land. Now, what to do then is really what people decided to do. I mean, that's more politics. And I support the people in Israel being able to live now in their society and their lives and to have a decent time, a decent quality of life for them. But in terms of what should have been done, and if you could go back in time, I think it certainly shouldn't have been that it was a war where 20,000 people died and 75,000 Palestinian refugees or 750,000 Palestinian refugees, 800,000 Jewish refugees, and precipitated by a Holocaust and the largest war that ever happened in history. I mean, it'd be nice to not have the country have been created that way. I think it'd been better if the Jews came here and their Palestinian brothers welcomed them with open arms and we all sat around eating hummus. I think that would have been much nicer. But like now we are where we are today. We got to figure out what should we do to make it better so that we could all continue living here. Because like I'm a Zionist in the terms that I support the Jews living here, but I'm against the Palestinians leaving. So I think we have to all find a way to live here together in some way that works.
Rafi, Greta asked an interesting question. And Greta, sure. I was just clarifying that Omar point for the video itself to be like, you know, there doesn't seem to be a reason why Omar should have to go through these restrictions because he says that he's a normal, perfectly regular 25-year-old student
sure.
inside of there. So, Rafi, the question that Greta asked though, which is interesting to point out, is what gives you the right to live in Jerusalem when Omar can't live there?
I think Jerusalem should be a shared city for all the people. I'm not going to say I support Omar's restrictions on movements throughout this really small country. I mean that's not fair. I support my right to be here, and I support Omar's right to come visit me. You know, but how to pull that off practically. I think.
Rafi.
Yeah.
Let me say something, please. I have the right to visit and to live in Jerusalem. I don't have the right just to go and visit and then to go back.
No, I'll be fine. You can be my neighbor, man. It's all right.
I have the right to live in Haifa, to live in Java, and to live in all these Palestinian cities. Why can't the 5 million Palestinian refugees go back to their homes? You can see what's happening to them in Al Yarmouk refugees camp. Hundreds of them died because of this being far away from their country. Why can't they go back? I mean, Jews.
I agree. I would mind if they wanted to come back. I mean, I think we could, in real life, we should find some kind of compromise and let those Palestinians who want to return to Israel proper to go back to Israel proper. Those who want to live in a Palestinian state should be assisted to do so, and those who want to stay where they are can stay where they are, and they can get some kind of compensation. I think we should definitely have to address the issue of
Omar,
the Palestinian refugees and find out a realistic way to make that happen as best as possible.
Omar, what do you think about that?
I can see that Rafi has some kind of a point, but why is it allowed for the Russian Jews who have no connections with the Palestinian land to come here and to live in our cities? Why? Just because of some UN resolutions that gave Israel this right to exist?
I mean, Israel's right to exist is because it does exist. I mean, this is the government.
Rafi, it does exist by committing massacres and ethnic cleansing. It does exist because Israel doesn't want peace.
That's what happened. I mean, I won't say it's entirely one-sided, but there was certainly a violent conflict.
It is a violent conflict. It is because it's
true. And I mean, as far as Russian Jews.
Rafi?
Hey guys, you both
come back here if they want to, but I have no problem with the Palestinians also being here.
Yeah, go ahead, Omar. You can comment. I was just gonna say to both of you, if we can just for the video purposes, just try speaking one at a time. It would be best so that we could hear each other. No one gets cut out.
Great.
Omar, do you want to respond?
Well, I just want to say that Israel doesn't have any right to exist. It doesn't.
So, Omar, my question to you that's kind of popped up a little bit recently that I want to ask you about is Rafi's, kind of saying he wants everyone to be able to come and live freely and, live in Jerusalem, not just visit and go back to their homes, but be able to actually live here freely. And you're saying Israel doesn't have a right to exist. I'm curious to know, do you think Israel doesn't have a right to exist based on it being called a Jewish state? Do you think Israel doesn't have a right to exist based on Jews just shouldn't be allowed to live there? Can you just elaborate on what you mean by that?
I will. What I mean is Israel doesn't have the right to exist because it was created by massacres ethnic cleansing and by taking all the lands of the Palestinians. And I'm sure you know about the Haganah, the Stern, and the Irgun gangs who massacred the Palestinians in Deir Yassin, and all those 500 villages were wiped off the map, Max. And I'm sure you can understand how hard it is. This is the cheapest occupation in the entire history. If Jews wanted to live in Palestine, I have no problem with that. They lived before 1948, way before 1948. And they were living peacefully with the Muslims and Christians, and they had all kinds of freedom. No one interfered with their freedoms.
Right. Rafi, if you want to comment on that, just 1 second. I have to close my door. 1 second.
Sure. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough situation, but I don't think of it as in terms of what was. It should have been ideally that the Jews and the Palestinians could live here peacefully together. But the fact is that didn't happen. But I don't support kicking the Jews out either. I think that all the people could find a way to live, and I think in practicality, I think having each group having its own state and then putting that state in some kind of union, a federation, a confederation is more practical. The Israelis as a group, I mean, there's also Palestinians that are part of Israel that have been living here for 65 years, and this is sort of their society, and they want to have representation as a group,
Rafi.
Yeah.
Would your confederation allow 5 million Palestinian refugees to go back to their homes and lands? Would it? Would it release?
I think in theory it could, depending on how you could convince people what to do. I mean, there was an interesting study that was done by the Palestinian Authority. And if the situation was that Israel would let in a limited number of Palestinian refugees, it wasn't clear what the number was, but obviously enough so that it would still be a state that was majority Jewish. And the other option was to move to a Palestinian state after it was created, in a full-size Palestinian state, or stay where they are if they're outside of the country. And only 10% of those people said that they wanted to live as Israelis in the state of Israel, whereas the majority of those people preferred to live in a Palestinian state. So, and what's sort of a parallel between the Israelis and the Palestinians is most Israelis, like now in 2012, would prefer to live in a state that was majority, their culture, and where they felt like their freedoms were going to be secured. And the same thing for the Palestinians. They prefer to live in an Arab majority state where they felt like they weren't going to be treated as second class or anything like that. And it's a similar thing on both sides. I mean, both groups are sort of looking for representation for them as a group. I mean, that's sort of why the Zionists came up with this idea. They wanted the Jewish people to have a seat in the UN and get international representation and be protected. And the Palestinians, because of what happened with the whole creation of the state of Israel, are in very much the same boat. A lot of them are outside the country. They're dreaming of coming back to their homeland, and they need representation for them as a group. And I think if you try to make just one state like all at once, I think it'd be a very big political conflict. Instead of people voting like liberals or conservatives, they would just be voting Jewish or Arab. Trying to monopolize control. And
so that makes
it's not.
Omar, why don't you? Omar, I want you to
add something.
Go ahead.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Okay, I just want to add that it's not the Jews. We don't have problem with Jews particularly. We have problems with occupation, with Zionists. We don't have problem with Jews. We live peacefully with Jews way before Israel existed. We don't have a particular problem with Jews. Jews are a people of religion.
I appreciate that. I understand that.
We respect their religion. In fact, we are not considered Muslims until we believe in Jesus or Moses. It's not the Jew-Muslim thing or Jew-Palestinian or Jew-Arab thing. It's between the occupation, the occupiers, and the occupied.
Right. Now, so Omar, I hear exactly what your point is right there. And I thought Rafi brought up an interesting idea regarding like a two-state solution with sort of some sort of unionization where there'd be free travel within both of the different states because there probably Israelis that would love to live, let's say, in the Gaza Strip, but they're afraid to do so. And so my question to you is does some sort of solution where it's like a two-state but yet a unionization where there's clearly free flow of goods and traffic and transportation between those two states would make sense? Does something like that make sense to you?
It doesn't make sense, Max, because it won't happen in the first place. Because you can't have Palestinians out of their lands and Jews occupying their lands and houses. We tried this, the Palestinian Authority tried this as a temporary solution, but it didn't work out. Every time Israel broke the ceasefire and waged war on the Palestinians.
Right. So, I mean, ultimately, is what you're saying that you have no problem with living side by side with Jews, but in terms of having these, what I think you said 3 or 5 million refugees coming back into the land, are you saying that the only way that would work is if Palestinians are then able to go ahead and kick back out Jews that are supposedly living in their houses? Is that what you're saying you support?
I'm not saying that the Palestinian refugees should come back and kick Jews out by force. The Jews should go back to their countries. Every one of them, every one of the Israeli citizens has at least another nationality, mostly Russians or Americans.
No, it's not quite true. The majority of Israelis don't have other citizenship. A large number of people do.
I guess you have an American citizenship, Rafi. That's right.
I do, but my wife is Iraqi, and she does not have an Iraqi citizenship, and neither do her parents. Her parents fled Iraq.
You can take your wife to live in the United States without having
problems.
Yeah,
but I can't take all of her cousins, and I can't take her mother, and I mean, these people have been living here for multiple generations. This is their home also at this point. And I mean, I also think that Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people. Like, I think we belong to this place. But I don't. I mean,
you don't belong to this place, Rafi. You belong to the United
States.
So
that's the difference of agreement. I mean, that's why there's a conflict.
Yeah, that's why there's a conflict. That's why the Zionist movement fed up your brain with all this propaganda.
So what if I made you an offer? I said all the Jews in the world could come here and all the Palestinians, and we'll build houses for everyone, and we'll all live like kings. Is that okay? Would that be okay with you?
It's not gonna happen, Rafi. You know that.
Omar, I think. Omar, would you it's obviously the most ideal proposal, and why it may or may not work is a completely different story. But the point is that Vonvo is looking to allow people such as yourself and Rafi to understand that these sorts of solutions maybe could be possible if the right political parties were doing the right things for yourself and for Rafi. So would you?
That's right.
That's right. And so would you? Would you be in favor of a solution like that if it was possible?
If it was possible and all the Palestinian refugees went back to their lands and houses, I have no problem with that, because as I said before, we had Jews living in Palestine before the creation of Israel. But let me tell you something, Max. The Israeli governments are getting worse and worse. You have Lieberman, you have Netanyahu, and they are all extremists.
Right. Now, my question to you, Omar, and I think it's interesting to bring up, and Rafi, you can contribute here also. Omar,
sure.
in terms of the political parties, you just mentioned that a solution like that, like Rafi just said, although you support it, you don't think it's possible. And you've kind of mentioned political party-wise, that might be the biggest issue. Do you think that there are issues with how you're being politically represented on both the Palestinian side, with like both Hamas and PLO, and do you think that there's issues with Well, why don't you address your parties first? Do you think that there's serious issues with those parties?
Well, I do have a serious issue with those parties because some parties like the well, let me say first that I used to be a pro Fatah party when Fatah was using the armed struggle to liberate Palestine. But now I don't have any connection with any party. I just support everyone who's trying to liberate his land. I want my land back, and this is my right. But I do have an issue with the parties representing both Israelis and Palestinians. First
So,
of all, the Palestinian Authority doesn't represent most of the Palestinians, especially the Palestinian refugees. And this is a huge problem
can
because the Palestinian refugees do want a government and an authority that works to get them back to their land and not to sell their right of return like Mr. Abbas said, no return to Safad. We want to go back to Safad, to Haifa, to Yaf, to Jerusalem.
so what exactly is President Abbas doing incorrectly? Could you just repeat it again and clarify it a little bit, and then could you go into Hamas afterwards?
Can you repeat, please, Max?
Yeah, of course. Omar, I said, would you mind clarifying exactly what you dislike about the PLO? And then would you also then move into what you like or dislike about Hamas?
What I what I dislike of the PLO is the recognition of Israel, Oslo Accords, because it means that Israel has the right to exist and the Palestinian refugees do not have the right of return. This is a problem. You can prevent Palestinians from going back to their lands and homes. And I'm sure you heard about President Abbas said that he has the right to visit Safad, but not to live there. Well, he might be talking about himself, but he has no right to talk about other Palestinians living as refugees in Syria or Lebanon or other countries. This is a very important issue, the right of return.
Right. Now, what about in regards to, and Rafi, we'll get you to comment on that in a minute. Omar, what about your views on Hamas? And I mean, just overall from my end, I think it's very interesting to hear that you don't really like to affiliate yourself with either of these parties, and I think that that's an interesting point to maybe look into of why maybe there's no peace over there. But can you talk about Hamas a bit?
Well, Hamas is a Palestinian faction who chose the way of armed struggle to liberate Palestine. I personally didn't have any connection in my life with Hamas. Just like you, I watched the TV or in general. I didn't have any connection with Hamas or other parties more than any other Palestinian. It's just a Palestinian faction working to liberate Palestine, just like Fatah used to do during the 19th.
Right now, do you just quickly, and then we'll get Rafi in here to talk about maybe some of the Israeli political parties. Omar, an interesting question I'd like to throw out to you is: do you over here in America, they label Hamas as a terrorist organization? Do you agree? Do you agree with that title? And do you disagree with some of the actions that Hamas, has, let's say, done in the past or promoted in the past, such as suicide bombings? Can you give us your opinion on that?
Okay, Max. Well, of course, I don't agree with labeling Hamas or any other Arab movements as a terrorist organization because the United States doesn't have the right to label anyone just like she wants. I mean, you can't label any other movement you don't like as a terrorist organization. It's not your right. You're not the officer of this world. Why don't you go and label those who did 9/11 as terrorists. They weren't Muslims or Arabs. And you know, there are many proofs that it was an inside job. And until now, no one knows the truth. You can't blame others who want their homeland back for being and label them as terrorists.
Right.
Hamas is a resistance organization. It's a movement that struggles to get back the Palestinian refugees to their homes.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. And just quick yes or no. I mean, such events, and then I really want to get Rafi in here to comment.
Sure.
Such events, such like that have happened in the past that like get publicized in the news over here, such as like suicide bombings. Do you think that they're all just simply action in regards to the resistance movement, or do you think it's it might be extremists who are interested in killing innocent civilians? What do you think it's more or less of?
Well, I don't agree with killing any civilian, Max. Or was a question for Rafi or me?
It was for you, and then we're gonna get Rafi in here.
Okay, I don't agree in killing any civilian, whether it was a Palestinian or an Israeli. I mean, I don't like to see Jewish kids getting killed. I don't like this. But they are killing our kids in Gaza, as you said.
Right.
Hundreds of children were killed by Israel in Gaza. You can't blame Palestinians for committing suicide bombings and bombing them at the same time with F-16s and American-made Apache helicopters. You can't do that.
Right. Rafi, can you chime in on a lot of what Omar's just said? I think it's some interesting points.
I mean, in any country, if one side, I mean, I see the Palestinians trying to protect themselves. I mean, PLO, PLP, it's all the same. It's a lot like the IRA in Ireland. They were an organization that wanted to liberate Ireland, and they're trying. Once you're in a military conflict, the rules get ugly, and that's how the reality is. But me, as a citizen of Israel, I'm not going to support not stopping Hamas from shooting rockets at me or allowing suicide bombers or anything else. I mean, if they want to fight me, I'm going to support the guys who are protecting me, and that's the reality of life. But I mean, it'd be nice though. In principle, I don't have any real objection to refugees coming back or for us all living here. I mean, I don't agree with the idea that the Jews should go back to other countries. A lot of them, they've been living here for several generations, and also this is the homeland that they want to go. This is the place they want to be. And they've established a country. Yes, man.
Rafi,
what, Omar?
we didn't have rockets in 1948 when we were massacred in Deir Yassin. We didn't have rockets in 1967 when we were out of West Bank and Gaza Strip. We didn't. I mean, don't know if
Gaza was under Jordan, and they certainly had rockets, and they had lots of munitions, and so did Egypt. I mean, it was a huge war before 1967.
Yeah,
but the other side was certainly armed.
Because it's an Arab land. It's not a Jewish land.
I hear your opinion. I mean, I just think it's the Holy Land.
It's my opinion, and it should be yours. It should be yours.
You say it shouldn't be mine, or it should be mine?
If you are not a bad person, and if you are not fed up with all the Zionist propaganda, you wouldn't support a state such as Israel. You wouldn't. Gaza was West Bank and Gaza were inhabited by Palestinians for hundreds of years.
I know that. I understand. I mean,
you know that. Why do you support such a state?
I mean, I like I said, I don't support the way it was created. I don't think people should have been kicked out of their houses. I don't think there should have been a violent military conflict. I think that the Jews and the Palestinians should have found a way to live together in peace. And you're saying they always did, but I mean, what was new with the Zionist movement is they brought 500,000 or 600,000 Jews here. It wasn't the same as having 20,000 Jews in Jerusalem, a few thousand in Sfat. It totally changed the dynamics of the country. I mean, half the country was Jewish, or was a third Jewish. and they wanted to get some kind of representation. I think they could have made some system where every side was represented and nobody had to be kicked out of their houses. You know, obviously, I don't support kicking anybody out of their house. You know, in any culture.
Unfortunately, it didn't happen. It didn't happen because the Zionist mentality doesn't believe in any kind of peace. Every time we had a temporary peace, Israel broke the ceasefire, and you know that.
You know, I'm not sure on all the details. I don't know all the entire ceasefire situation. I mean, from the news that I hear, all I know is that there's missiles being shot at my side, and then and reports of us attacking back, and I don't really know who shot first and who started it. And from the real perspective, I mean, the whole thing got started 65 years ago. It's not like
Rafi,
this round of fighting is different from the last one.
There was a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel before the assassination of Ahmad al-Jabari. Do you know that?
But I know that there were missiles being shot. I have friends in Sderot. There were missiles being shot at them the day that Kateri Emmer came here. 2 weeks before that.
Before the missiles, Israel attacked al-Jabari and assassinated him. There were no missiles until they attacked him. They killed him.
I understand, but there were also missiles being shot the week before.
This is a violation of ceasefire. Israel broke ceasefires like tens of times during its age.
We have a ceasefire now, and it's still holding.
So I want to ask.
Ceasefire means yes, Max.
Yeah, I mean Greta brought up. I'm not familiar with this person. She wanted me to ask you, Rafi, if you're familiar with Baruch Goldstein and his suicide movement that occurred back in 1994, I believe. I'm a little. Are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah, obviously I know who Baruch Goldstein is. He was a settler who lived in Kiryat Arba, right outside Hebron.
Okay.
And he went into the Al Ibrahimi Mosque, the Mar HaMachpelah, the Tomb of the Patriarchs, and he shot a whole bunch of people. And then they eventually overpowered him and killed him. I mean, it's a horrible act of terrorism. You know, not much you could say about it. It's just like any kind of mass murder. It's a terrible thing.
Okay. I didn't know if there was a lot more to maybe elaborate on past that. So Omar, I guess just do you hear me?
Yes, Max.
Oh, hi. Okay.
Yes,
okay. So I mean, I think that obviously this sort of discussion is hopefully extremely valuable for anyone who watches to understand both Omar and Rafi where you're each coming from and knowing what the situation is. Omar, I know that Rim mentioned that you wanted to speak a little bit about the hunger strikes which are going on right now, I believe, inside these Israeli prisons. Would you like to elaborate on what's going on with that?
Yes, of course. We have now many Palestinian hunger strikers. We have the Sharauni who stopped his hunger strike, and we have Samir al-Isawi who has been on hunger strike since 146 days, and we have other prisoners. Most of these hunger strikers were released on Shalit's swap deal. You know that, I'm sure. It happened in 2007, and they were released by an agreement between Israel and Hamas to release Gilad Shalit in exchange for releasing 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. They were detained and they were taken to prison and without any kind of trial or charge. And now all they ask that they want their basic rights inside the prison. They want the right of their parents visiting them. You can't prevent a prisoner who has been for years inside the prison not to see his family or his parents. So they went on their hunger strike to demand their freedom or their basic rights. They just want their freedom. They want to go back to their families, to their moms. And Samir al-Isawi has a brother who was killed by Israel. and he has another brother inside the prison too, and he was brutally assaulted inside the Israeli court in front of the judge. This is not human at all. To hit a prisoner who has been weak and on a hunger strike for 146 days, this is not human at all.
Right. Now, Omar, I mean, thank you for telling us exactly what's really been going on, and I think that's, crazy. That's very sad to hear that, some of these prisoners aren't able to see their families. That seems like a basic right throughout any prison, that you're able to still have that occur. Do you, personally, do you know if any of the people, that are on this hunger strike right now, I don't know if you don't know them personally by any chance. You don't know. Do you?
I know someone personally. He has been. Yes, I know someone.
So what was he put in jail for? And I mean, whether or not he's innocent or guilty is kind of hard for us to talk about right now. But is there what was the reason why he was put in jail in the first place?
To be honest, Max, I don't have the reason they put him in jail for yet. He wasn't affiliated in any Palestinian faction. He wasn't. He was just a normal guy who got married and who's living a very normal life. His name is Uday al-Kilani, by the way.
Do you want to?
He has been on hunger strike for, I guess, 60 days. He was arrested from his house, Max, and he was taken to prison, and he was put in administrative arrest. He has no charge or trial. This guy even have his first son, and he didn't see him yet. Can you believe how hard it is? This is a simple example of the suffering of the Palestinian prisoners inside the Israeli prisons.
Right.
I mean, this guy wasn't affiliated in Hamas or Fatah or Islamic Jihad. He was just a normal guy going to the mosque, visiting his relatives, going to his wife's family and visiting them. He didn't do anything wrong.
Right. No, that's Rafi. What I mean, if Omar's saying that he knows this individual personally, and he's bringing up these different faults that are occurring within now the Israeli justice system. What is your as an American, what's your impression of potentially these sorts of things going on and potentially relatively frequently?
I mean, we got to work on this sort of stuff. I don't agree with the administrative detentions without trial. I think it's like what goes on in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. It's problematic, You definitely don't want to hear that sort of thing. And I agree. I mean, if they're not letting his family come and other obnoxious things, they should at least let him do that. And it should definitely be brought to trial. I don't really know the details of this specific case or anything, but certainly, I mean, if he's not guilty of a crime, he shouldn't be in jail. And if he is, I mean, depends on what he's guilty of. But so I don't see why not here. I don't see how that harms anybody.
So, I mean, this is a very interesting point to, like you're saying, these sorts of things need to be worked on. I mean, ultimately, what do you think, I mean, Rafi or Omar, what do you think would be the response? If let's say someone like Benjamin Netanyahu saw this video tomorrow and heard about Omar's story saying that, one, Omar is just a normal 25-year-old individual, and what do you call it? His friend in prison was a normal 25-year-old individual. What do you think Benjamin Netanyahu's response would be to why he's in prison? What would be, and what do you think his response would be to why he's not allowing his family at least to visit him? It's one thing to be in jail, but then to maybe not have that occur. The family visiting is another really interesting point to tackle and figure out a solution for why. Do any of you have a Omar? You want to go first? What do you think?
Yeah.
Omar.
I mean, why Israel has administrative detention?
Well, Max, I don't know why they.
Go ahead, Omar.
I don't know, man. I don't know. You should ask them, Rafi. You should ask them. Really. Why do they have
Okay, will
prisoners
do.
in administrative detention for all this time? I mean, it's not only 6 months, and they renew those 6 months always. They had him for the first time for 6 months, and they renewed this. He has been in prison for a year and a half. And this guy, I'm telling you, and I am definitely very sure that he has done nothing to Israel. He never hurt anyone in his whole life. He's a religious guy. He doesn't have any problems with the Palestinian Authority. I don't know why they have him in the prison in the first place. And he had his first son while being in the prison. You can imagine how hard it is for a father not to see his son.
Right.
It's a horrible thing.
Yes, it is horrible indeed. I don't know if Benjamin Netanyahu thinks of it this way or thinks of him as a potential terrorist, maybe. But this is not human at all.
Right. And no, it's certainly
trial. It's not a reasonable thing to do in a civilized society.
yeah, no, I mean, for sure.
I'll contact my congressman and complain. I will.
So Omar, is there? Go ahead, Rafi. Go ahead, Rafi.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, it's pretty bad situation to have extended administrative detentions and understand the security concerns, and really there needs to be better cooperation between Israel and Palestine for this sort of thing, because from Israel's perspective, they don't have enough information on this guy maybe because they have witnesses from the Palestinian side for his trial. You know, they can't just stand him in court because the place that they were arresting him from was not even their country. It's a messed up situation.
Right.
And there needs to be a consistent justice system that's sort of linked between Israel and Palestine. There's no way it can really be, you know, completely independent, because it's not functional. It's like when America took over Iraq, and then they're going to start putting Iraqis on trial in America. Eventually, you know, that's ridiculous. Eventually, they had to create an Iraqi justice system, and people were brought to court there. And there was also the U.S. did administrative detentions and that sort of thing, and it's a big problem.
Right.
I think.
Omar, do you want to respond to that? Because otherwise,
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I just want to say that the Israeli soldiers kidnapped 900 Palestinian children in 2012. The Palestinian Ministry of Defense reported this year that there was a sharp increase in Israeli violations against Palestinian children. And the Israelis kidnapped 900 Palestinian children, comparing to 700 kidnapped children last year. This is so bad. Those children were beaten, were assaulted inside the prison. They were tortured in the most brutal ways. The soldiers would punch and kick them. You can imagine how hard it is for a minor.
Yeah.
And I am sure you know about the international humanitarian law, about the treatment of prisoners of war, Geneva Agreement, and that was signed in 1929.
Use prisoners. I agree.
This is a violation of all the international laws. I mean, what can a 14 years old children do to Israel?
I don't know. I recently read that they passed a law to limit the amount of time of administrative detention for a minor to under 24 hours or something like that. Just a little more reasonable. It's like if you get arrested here for anything, they'll hold you for an hour or 24 hours sometimes. But yeah, it's a big problem with the arrests and administrative detentions, and not, I don't know. I'm not going to try to justify exactly why people were arrested. I don't know the deal as far as the details of the justice system.
But I mean, there's definitely it's definitely apparent that there are clearly some flaws in the system. Now potentially here in the justice system, and I mean, if these sorts of facts are true, it makes one, not saying me personally, but anyone who were to watch this video, it has to make people think whether or not, Israel is really, I guess, a true democracy, by having these sorts of violations. What I was going to ask next is, oh no, I kind of forgot my question.
I mean, I could answer that. Israel is sort of a democracy and a half. It's democracy within its territory of regular Israel. But once you get into the West Bank, it's like America controlling Iraq or something. It's not a clean cut system, and it's difficult to make it that.
Right.
Yes.
Omar, go ahead.
It's only a democracy for Jews, not for Palestinian Arabs. There is no system of justice that meets up with the needs of the Arab population inside what you call Israel. I mean, you can't, as an Arab living in Israel, I am definitely very sure that you can't enjoy the governmental services or something just like the Jews do.
I mean, it's not that bad, but they don't have the same level of representation that the Jewish people have.
So Omar, Rafi,
they don't have this level of representation because they are not allowed to run for Knesset and other governmental positions.
That's not true. We have Arabs running for Knesset.
It is true, Rafi. It is true. And Haneen Az-Zobi, she was forbidden from running into a Knesset member. You can
but not the rest of her parties. The rest of her parties, Ibrahim Sarsours is still running. They have Israeli Arabs that are still running. Ahmed TV.
Rafi.
They banned her based on her presence on the Gaza flotilla because she had been on that. It's not sure if she's necessarily going to be banned, but a bunch of other members of Knesset brought it up to committee that, yeah.
What's wrong being on a freedom flotilla that goes to break the siege of that boat on Gaza? I mean, there were also Jews on that freedom flotilla.
Right, but according to Israel, at least from their perspective, that was considered being involved in terrorism because it became a violent conflict with the soldiers. So there was objections raised by other Knesset members. But the thing is, that doesn't mean that Arabs can't run in the government. There are Arabs in the government. Arabs get the same level of service, I think. I mean, it's not entirely the same, obviously.
Omar, I want to ask you. I think an important question. I've spoken to a bunch of Israelis, that were in the army. I've spoken to just regular Israeli citizens, and they said that they know plenty of, Arab individuals and Palestinian individuals, that, go to school with them, and live with them, and do homework with them. I wanted to ask you, what is the difference between you being one of those, Arab or Palestinian individuals, going to school with one of the people who've spoken on Vonvo, and the people that they're referring to? What could you guess is the difference?
The difference is in the mentality. There are normal Jews who do not have any problems with the Palestinians, and there are the extreme Zionists who want to wipe off the Palestinians out of Palestine. They want even to wipe Palestine off the map.
Right.
This is the difference, Max.
But
I don't have problem with any Jew. I only have problem with Zionists.
I'm telling you, but a lot of those nice people who are fine with living with Arabs in Israel and want a Palestinian state, they still consider themselves Zionists. Because they're in favor of the Jews being here and having self-determination and representation. But, not really, they wouldn't want to do things at the expense of Arabs. And there are Arabs who work with us and live with us. You go to the doctor's office, you'll probably find an Arab doctor.
So, Omar, the fact that Rafi is saying that some of these normal Israeli individuals who are friends with Palestinian and Arab individuals who live normally and go to school with them, that unfortunately are different from you who aren't able to do that. My question is, do you have Rafi's saying that some of those people might be considered Zionists because they believe that they have a right to live in those lands as well. Do you have a problem with those Zionists, or do you have a problem with the Zionists that are looking to kick you out and ethnically cleanse you forever?
I have a problem with the latter.
The latter.
The Zionists who want to kick me out of my land.
Right. Okay, so and I guess then ultimately that turns into a question of what exactly is a Zionist. Is that a relevant point, Rafi? Is there a lot of different interpretations of just that word as a whole?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of different views on what Zionism means. I mean, originally it was just sort of like what happened with the Pilgrims. They wanted representation. They wanted freedom. They felt like they were being oppressed somewhere. And the Jews wanted to go somewhere and have some kind of representation. And that was the basic plan. And then the Zionism connection with the land of Palestine that became Israel is that it had been a long-standing Jewish tradition and part of the culture that they had originated in this land, and that this is where they were ultimately from, and ideally would ultimately like to go back to. It was sort of built into the culture, but not necessarily that they were going to make some kind of democratic state or do any kind of thing. I mean, that was sort of developed with Zionism. But there were also cultural Zionists who wanted to make one state with Palestinians, or even just leave as part of a greater Middle Eastern country, or just have sort of a Jewish cultural center built up in Palestine, just bring more Jews here and more Jewish schools and culture and stuff like that. So I mean, Zionism could mean a lot of different things. A lot of people, they feel like they're just Jewish. They like being in Israel. They like being within the Jewish culture that they have here, and through kosher restaurants,
right,
and Jewish.
Right. Omar, what's your take on
schools and all that sort of thing?
Omar,
they don't have necessarily any issue with Arabs in particular, or Palestinians even, though
right,
sort of live and let live. And then you have more extreme people that are like, this land all belongs to me and it's only for the Jews. They're a little bit silly, I think.
Yeah.
You know what's the problem, Rafi? Rafi, do you know what's the problem? The problem is that Zionism became a form of nationalism for Jews. This is a huge mistake. I mean, there's a huge difference between Judaism and Zionism. Zionism doesn't represent all the Jews in this world. It's supposed the problem is
that's what sort of makes what a Jew is.
Zionism supports a purely Jewish state in all of Palestine. Even No, this is true.
No, I'm telling you, Judaism does not necessarily, certainly not even Zionism.
Guys, let Omar finish his point, Rafi.
Sorry.
Omar, finish your point, and then Rafi will respond.
Well, my point is that Zionism wants a purely Jewish state. It wants the Arab out of Palestine, and it even wants parts of Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Egypt. It's like the Greater Israel. They call it the Greater Israel, from Nile to Euphrates. They want the Arab to be kicked out of their land.
Right. Okay, Rafi.
I am sure that not every Jew in this world agrees to the same point.
Rafi, go ahead.
Okay, sure. I mean, I'm a Zionist, and I don't think that, definitely, even amongst other people who are Zionists, they don't think that it has to be a purely Jewish state on all of Palestine. I mean, they originally agreed to two states because they were willing to live on part of Palestine and to not kick any Arabs out. I mean, at least some of them, and some of them were obnoxious, thought that was necessary or whatever to kick Arabs out of their houses, and then that's completely, I think, wrong. But you don't necessarily have to support kicking Arabs out of their lands to be a Zionist. I mean,
if this was wrong, Rafi, if this was wrong, where I did this wrong, then why Israel's flag have those two blue lines? Those two lines represent the Nile and the Euphrates, and that Israel is from Nile to Euphrates. And the
two blue strips.
No, this is true. This is true, and you know deep inside you that what I'm saying is totally true.
Go ahead, Rafi.
The strings that you have, it's sort of a religious reference to Jews, but it's not necessarily about the Nile to the Euphrates. You would have this four-cornered garment that they would wrap around themselves, called a talit, and on the ends you would have these strings, and you would have on each one you'd have one blue string. It'd be like a blue fringe. and it was sort of commanded in the Bible, and you would see the blue, and you would remember the sky and remember that God is above you. So, and that sort of culturally got translated onto the flag, but certainly not like necessarily do most Jews think that we need to control everything from the Nile to the Euphrates. I mean, even in the Bible, it's not clear that the Nile and to the Euphrates all the way in Iraq. But that was the place where the children of Israel had lived, like, biblically. And the Jews aren't even all of the children of Israel. They just believe that they're part of this group that lives on this land, and they should be able to live here in some way. I think any version of that is even religious Zionism. Secular Zionism was just we should have a state somewhere in the world and have representation for the Jewish people as a group. I mean so that's basic Zionism. And neither one of those philosophies needs to entail kicking anyone out of their house. I mean, I'm a Zionist, and I'm strongly against kicking people out of their houses. I think it's immoral. And the fact that it happened a long time ago, there has to be some kind of compensation and worked out kind of solution because of the fact that it had been done in the past. But, you know, I'm still in favor of the Jews being able to come here as our homeland. But I don't think it's going to be where the Jews kick out all the Arabs. I think that's ridiculous. I think we need to find a way to live in peace with all the Arabs here, and I think eventually it'll be, you know, some kind of European Union, regional union for the whole Middle East, and we'll all do business together. We'll be successful, and it'll be a very nice place to live. I think that's something we should sort of strive for. So,
Rafi, I have just an interesting question to throw at you. So you're interested in that solution, and now my question would be: is a lot of people who say that only a one-state solution is possible. And you're saying, you know, you're a Zionist, but you don't think that people getting kicked out of their homes, you think that's immoral, so that shouldn't have happened, and they should be allowed to return. You know, if they return, there are people, you know, such as Omar, and I didn't get his exact answer to this question, but, you know, there have been other people who have come on the site that have given me this.
In a lot of places.
Well, so they've given me this perspective where, you know, they don't want to live inside of Israel, because it's not Israel, it's Palestine. Ultimately, if we were to take your suggestion, the ideal scenario where it is everyone gets to come back, they get back their homes, they get back compensation for having to leave, and we all live like kings. Does ultimately, under that situation, does it turn into a conflict then? And I'm kind of foreshadowing here, but is it then a conflict of?
It depends how
Is it a conflict of what the country is then called? Because it doesn't seem like, you know, Omar, and he'll correct this if I'm wrong, would want to then live under a state called Israel. So does it turn into a name issue?
It's a possibility. I mean, I think the most realistic solution is to make two states, one state called Israel and one state called Palestine, and then let the relationship between those states sort of evolve. I think a good place to start is some kind of regional economic union, and then it could go the path that the United States went, and just make, you know, you have Illinois, you have Indiana, you have different states, and eventually they form into a single country. And they could go through that process and in 50 years decide, you know, what the hell, we all like each other anyways, we'll just call it one country and get it over with. And, you know, they may choose to go the route that Europe does, where they have like Belgium and Netherlands and Luxembourg and all these tiny little countries next to each other. But people, you know, they found a way to get along, and so people can move around between them and they could have economic cooperation. And I think that something like that would be realistic for the region. And as far as, you know, when I was saying the solution where, in theory, I mean, I was sort of testing the waters, if we let all the refugees come back and all the Jews, just to see would he be okay with that. I mean, I would be fine with that too in principle, but, like, I don't think the majority of people here on both sides would really handle that right now. I think along the lines of a two-state solution is more realistic, really, for the mentality of the two groups of people. I mean, even though, you know, we're all brothers and we're all the children of Abraham and everything like that, it's fantastic, but, you know, they still see themselves as two separate cultures. You know, you just try to mush them into one thing. It's, you know, you're better going a route like Canada even went with, you know, a French province and an English province. Start off with that.
Rafi.
Agree to.
Rafi.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear the Apache helicopters crossing by my sky. But
no, I think you're a bit north of me.
You are not. You're not being realistic here. You're not being realistic.
Okay, Omar, explain why.
I mean, because he's saying that we should have a two-state solution. why would you prevent Palestinians from going back to the territories that were occupied in 1948? I mean,
Then where would the Israelis go?
This is
I mean, not necessarily.
You can't force a refugee who has been living, or his grandfathers or his father used to live in Haifa or in Java, from going back to his land, to West Bank or to Gaza Strip or even to East Jerusalem. He wants to go back to Haifa.
I agree. I think, I think we could do some kind of compromise where at least a large number of refugees could go back to their homes, and they could give land back to the Palestinian Authority and build homes for people who want to live in a Palestinian state. I think we could.
Every refugee has the right to go back to his land and house.
So, Omar, okay, well, question, I just want to see if this person, Mark, do you hear me? I don't hear you or see you. Does Rafi or Omar, do you hear him or see Mark?
I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me.
I gotta get to the baby.
What's going on, Mark? How are you?
Good. I'm just listening in to figure out where I'm going to enter.
Okay, Mark. Okay, so Omar just finished his point. Mark, did you have any question that you wanted to ask Omar or Rafi? Excuse me.
Not yet.
Okay, you're just listening in?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Rafi, did you say you need to go and attend to the baby?
I got this baby monitor. She seems to have been quiet. I don't know. Touch and go.
Okay. I thought you said that. So here's what I was going to ask next. I'm actually also curious if anyone who's watching wants to join the conversation, because I think we have another one coming up shortly, so I may have to leave. But I mean, so what I was going to ask next, which I think is important, is kind of Vonvo related. So I'm going to ask it. I guess I'll ask the question to Rafi first, since he was he's from America, and then Omar, you'll give us your take on it. What do you think the role?
Max, I just have to say something that I might restart my computer because my cam might work this time.
You're coming in fine. If you want to just keep doing this, I'd rather not.
I mean, my cam might.
Well,
yes, Max, please go ahead.
What I was going to say, Omar, is I'd rather you stay in the conversation with your audio coming through, because if you leave and then come back and your camera doesn't work again, I don't want there to be any technical difficulties again. You know what I mean?
No, it's okay. It's okay. I won't have any difficulties, and I'm gonna check on my mom because she was calling me. Don't worry, I will be back.
Okay. All right. So we'll be right here.
Thank you so much, and thanks to Rafi, and I will be back soon.
Okay,
Bye.
great. You just have to click exit Vonvo, Omar. So Rafi, I was going to ask you a question, okay? Rafi, are you there? Rafi or Mark, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know where Rafi went. I know Omar just said he had to run, and he'll be back. Mark, if you've been listening in on the conversation for a little while, right?
I've been trying to. I've had technical difficulties.
Okay. Well, I guess then I'll ask you, where are you based out of?
Technion.
Okay, so you're inside of Israel.
Yes.
Okay. I was going to ask Rafi this next question. I guess I'll ask it to you because I don't think it requires, I don't think, okay, someone's saying they don't hear you. I hear you fine, so we'll definitely ask the questions. I'm assuming some people hear you. 1 second, though, okay?
Okay.
And I guess we'll wait for Rafi to get back also, but, Rafi, okay. Okay, so what I was going to ask you, Mark, is what do you think the role of the media plays in this whole situation, in this whole conflict. You know, the CNNs and the BBCs of the world. Do you think that they're in? You know, they're not portraying the real conflict as it truly is? And I wanted to get some opinions about that because that's ultimately what Vonvo is looking to create here. You know, an alternative to having to necessarily always listen to what the facts they're delivering.
Well, Mark, let me tell you, the media exists for one thing and one thing only, and that's to sell itself. And the best way to do that is to be sensationalist, to have stories that will make people angry or upset or awe-inspired, and giving a one-dimensional view of things sometimes, often, can sell the media that way. You know, they're corporations, they're companies, and they want to sell themselves. The way to do that is to get people interested in the stories that they have to say. And if they don't have anything interesting to say, they will make something interesting to say out of nothing.
Right. So, in terms of this conflict, then, do you think that they're doing, such a sensitive subject injustice by not allowing, certain facts to be exposed, such as like the things that, Omar was saying before? What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's not that they're not allowing facts to be. It's that they're just not interested in broadcasting them because they fear that it will diminish their audience. Right.
Okay. And so,
I mean, definitely there are political agendas. The media does have a huge impact on the political atmosphere of the world. So there is that, and I can tell you from personal experience that the media does portray events in a manner which would be beneficial to their political ideologies.
Right. So what I was going to say, and I want to definitely get your take on the conflict as a whole, but what I was going to ask is, do you think ultimately, platforms such as Vonvo, where, real citizens can come together and actually share their opinions and what they, believe to be true, is a better way for people to get a better overall perspective on topics like this and others, other topics which are, serious topics occurring around the world?
No, I don't. I think it's a good way to learn more, perhaps. But the only real way of getting true facts, things about stories that actually happen, is by talking to the people who live through those situations, who live in the conflict, whose lives are affected by the conflict. And I don't necessarily think that a media source such as this would necessarily allow the people who have the right answers to get the right and know the right questions to be able to get a forum to ask those questions and have those questions answered.
Right, but in the sense that Omar, is living inside of, the West Bank right now and has that, firsthand primary resource perspective, I mean, that's something that you're saying, though, you would respect, to hear to become more educated, right?
But I've also met very many people who are closely involved in this conflict, specific conflict, and they will misrepresent it in favor of their political doctrine.
Right.
And I don't necessarily believe, I think it's a great idea to think that people will be honest with each other over a video network such as this, but I don't think in reality that we can expect that the majority of talks end up that way.
Okay, so why don't you then,
in a world, yes, this would work.
Yeah, so why don't you? Would you mind giving? You're saying you're from Israel. Why don't you give us a background of yourself, and a background of yourself, and your overall opinion on the conflict going on right now.
Well, you asked me about media before, so I'll quickly tell you a story. A couple years ago, I was waiting for a bus in Kiryat Arba, and by Kiryat Arba, which is right next to Hebron. And while I was waiting, an Arab man pulled out a knife and ran at these two American religious girls who were in Israel to study for the year. And he stabbed one of them, and he couldn't get to the other one. Everyone was fine at the end of this confrontation, and there were soldiers standing right next to me, and they opened fire, and an Israeli driver, a citizen, ran over the guy. Now, it ended up that he survived. He was fine. They brought him to the hospital. Ambulances came. And I was reading the news later on I think, New York Times, and they reported that an Arab man was shot 3 times by Israeli soldiers, and that an Israeli citizen ran him over, forgetting to mention at all that he was in the process of trying to harm innocent, they were probably around 18-year-old girls. Right. And I was there. I saw it firsthand. And so that's some of the problems I have with media, and also with individuals as well. I think that the media has just as much incentive to lie or to misrepresent facts as an individual.
That's an amazing story to hear, and then also connect with the actual media. So that was actually that was very interesting to hear. Thank you for sharing that story.
Mm-hmm.
1 second. So would you mind then just sharing with us your overall? I don't have anyone right now inside the room to speak with you and potentially have a back and forth discussion with, so I can ask you a variety of questions, which I've been asking everyone on Vonvo. But can we start with just what's your overall take on the conflict as a whole, and what side do you support? Do you think that there's a resistance going on? Give us your overall sense of everything relating to this conflict.
Okay, well, the only option I see right now in regard to affecting change in the conflict is to affect no change. And that may seem counterintuitive, and it may seem a stance which wants to prevent peace, but what Israel requires in order to have peace is a peace partner. They need to have a nation. They need to have a government. They need to have an organization willing to make concessions, to have mutual land swaps, and without that organization that is willing to make peace with Israel, there can be no peace. And I think that the Palestinians as a nation, as a political identity, have proven themselves to be very immature. And I'm not saying this is true for the general population of them. I'm saying this is true for the leaders. I mean, on the eve of one of the largest rocket attacks in Israel's history, the Palestinians were granted observer status by the UN, which doesn't really mean that much, but still the world has consistently rewarded failures to show an effort of peace, to show goodwill, and they've rewarded that with this status. And Israel cannot have a lasting peace without a peace partner. And in order for that to happen, something has to change within the Palestinian community, and that Israel can't affect. The world can't affect that. No one can affect that. The only people who can affect that are Palestinians themselves. They need to step up. They need to hire. They need to remove their current leadership. They need to vote in leaders who truly desire peace. And once that happens, there will be nothing to stop peace.
So
yeah.
That I mean, I think a lot of what you're saying. There's definitely some things that are valid. A person in the text chat, I don't know if you are seeing what people are typing inside the text chat. Are you by any chance?
Oh no, I'm half doing math homework.
Okay, so an individual named Mary just asked me to ask you. Kiryat Arba is an illegal settlement. Israeli Jews are free to wander around the West Bank, but Palestinians are not allowed to enter Israel. What was Mark doing in Palestine?
So this is a good question, definitely good question, and I think it's a tragedy that Palestinians are not allowed to wander into Israel and to go where they want to go. But it's necessary. It's necessary because the security proven to prevent terrorist attacks. I have been on scene when terrorist attacks are foiled. For every terrorist attack that you hear about, there are 10, 20 that you don't hear about because the Israeli armed forces or the police department catch them. They deactivate those roadside bombs. And addressing her her idea that Israeli settlements are in fact illegal is wrong. I mean, I can understand how one might think that, but I don't want to go necessarily into detail about laws, but I can tell you that maybe I should. All right. So Israel was the region of Palestine is divided into two regions. You have Transjordan, and then you have Israel. And the Balfour Declaration, after the conclusion of World War I, decided that Israel would be given to the Jews and Transjordan would be given to Palestinians. In fact, you'll notice that the majority of the population of Jordan are Palestinians. And that was okay until the French and the British screwed up a bit, and King in Jordan decided to attack the French, and the English wanted to appease him, and so they decided that they're going to give only the land west of the Jordan to Israel. And then the Arabs said no, and so they divided that again. This is the third time the land was divided, and the Jews said yes, the Arabs said no, and there was war. You know the story. But what makes settlements legal is that at the time, in '67, land acquired by military conquest, a defensive military conquest, is legally considered yours. So according to international law, the land does belong to Israel, and Israel can do with it as it wants.
Right. So my question to you would be, you're saying that's a travesty that, Palestinians aren't able to travel freely. We just had an individual named Omar, who was on Vonvo, and he was sharing with us that, he's just a regular, normal 25-year-old, just regular individual. Do you think, and he's saying that he's participating in this resistance movement because he thinks that Israel is treating, these occupied territories at, they're getting wrongfully treated. Do you think that Israel's system of dealing with these occupied territories is flawed to the point where normal individuals, not extremists like Omar, are not able to live a normal life?
Live a normal life? No, I don't think that the security measures indeed did that. It might make it more inconvenient, which is absolutely true, but it is a safety measure that is required to protect Israeli citizens.
Okay, but what about? But ultimately, as a democracy, Israel considering themselves as a democracy, do you think that it's not democratically, acceptable to not allow individuals like Omar to, he said he hasn't been to Jerusalem in 11 years. Wouldn't you find that crazy if you were on the other side and you weren't able to, let's say you thought there was something amazing about, there was an amazing city in the West Bank, and you weren't able to get into there, which you are able to. Do you think that it's, do you think as a democratic society, which Israel calls itself as, people like Omar should easily be able to have whatever identification it is that they need to be able to travel freely?
I mean, of course I would be upset. But I wouldn't be upset at the Israeli government. I'd be upset with my peers, with my own people, for making such drastic measures necessary.
Right.
Meaning what I'm saying is that, and I'll reiterate again, I said it before, that if the Palestinians desired peace, there would be peace. Israel has given land. Israel gave over 2/3 of its mass back to Egypt for peace. And that's a lasting peace, and that peace worked. And Israel decided to do an experiment, and it gave back Gaza. And what did Israel receive in return for this huge gesture where it pulled out its own citizens? The country was rent in two. The emotional, the feeling here was awful when that happened, because they had Jews tearing down Jewish settlements in order to give this land back to peace. But it was a necessary step. And what happened with Gaza? Gaza became a rocket pad. So until Israel has a peace partner, then nothing more can be given. And to give and to concede at all anymore, to lift these restrictions, would show the Arabs that, yes, we can let them take advantage of us. And the Arabs need to understand that if they want peace, they will have it. Nothing in the world can stop them from having peace. The entire world would pressure Israel. Israel would have to give away land with mutually agreed swaps. Both concessions would be made on both sides if a peace partner. But the way it seems right now, that's impossible.
Hold on one second.
And I'd like to ask Rim S why it is BS. I'd like to hear the reasons why my argument is invalid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking if they want to come in and speak to you to counter what you're saying. If they're not gonna come in, then I'll just because it's worthwhile to ask. I can imagine some of the questions that they'd want to ask you. Mary says that the Palestinians need security. So ultimately, there's been a lot of Palestinian civilian deaths that have occurred through this occupation, and it's you would want to think that there's plenty of deaths that have occurred that probably these were innocent civilians. They were not all terrorists. What do you think in terms of militarily, the system being flawed, where you have a lot of not that we're trying to quantify by numbers, but there's been a lot of civilian deaths that have occurred amongst the Palestinian people for simply being in this. We're talking about them. It's being unjustified that they can't travel freely, and then they're occupied where now civilians die on a regular basis. Yeah, there's a right to secure the border, but ultimately, is the system flawed militarily how it's being handled, Mark?
So first of all, we have a problem here defining what civilian is, and I agree that civilians are dying on both sides, and it's not acceptable. But what I also have to say is that the Israeli military has done more than any other military in history to protect civilian lives, innocent civilian lives. Israel could just as well use regular explosives when they're air bombing different places that aren't precise, that are cheap to manufacture, but it's using these smart bombs, which cost $500,000, mind you, to manufacture one of them, and they're using them with high precision and in order to avoid civilian casualties. And unfortunately, it seems that some of the Palestinian leadership wants their civilians to be in danger. They want them to be there because when an Israeli accidentally kills a civilian, in their line of duty when they're trying to disarm terrorists, that makes Israel look bad. And this is just as much a media war as it is a land war on ground. And I have to be honest, the Palestinians are winning the media war. They're very good. They're very good at portraying themselves as the victim. And yeah, all right, that's it.
Okay, so, I mean, in terms of the media war, I mean, do you believe that it works both ways where, I mean, so for example, this one individual who was just in a discussion before was saying that in regards to the justice system, there are Palestinian prisoners that, first off, are on hunger strikes, and second off, are not allowed to, have not been able to see their family while being in prison for over a year now. And so, in terms of like a media war, do you think it's, I mean, you're saying that Palestinians are winning it, but the fact that certain items like that, if they're true, which, I mean, we're taking Omar's, word for it. I mean, I wouldn't think that people are on a 100-day hunger strike for, no apparent reason. Do you think that then, again, the justice system is flawed and Israel, not being exposed of those potential facts, if they are facts, is wrongful? And then maybe, is there an argument to be made that Israel is winning a media battle where those sorts of things aren't mentioned ever?
I don't really see where you're coming from, as when I read the news every day, I read about how, Israel's done some wrong to someone. I mean, just because not all cases of these prisoners are heard, but I mean, if you want to look at things with perspective, look at how Egypt treats the prisoners. They're crammed into overfilled facilities. They're not fed properly. The sanitation is horrible. Israeli prisons is quite the easy life for many an individual who winds up there.
Right. No, and I mean that might be true, and obviously, Egypt's a different country. It's just, to hear things like that, don't make much sense, because you get the impression, from any democracy, which Israel calls itself, that, something like a simple right of being able to see your family while in prison, should be something that everyone is entitled to, whether or not you're innocent or guilty. Do you agree with that?
Not necessarily. I don't really know enough about the facts of this, so I can't really give an intelligent answer. All I can say is that Israeli prisons are, that I know for sure, is that Israeli prisons are very humane, and that their inmates have time and have room for Quran classes and to have recreational time, and that they're fed well, and that they have enough room, and that they're sanitary. That's all I know about the prison system here.
Right. Okay, but
I would like to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to address what Amira A.
Yeah.
She said Palestinians don't have the weapons or military abilities as Israel does. There isn't real threats to Israel. Sadly, with America giving Israel generous amounts of aid, how could Palestinians properly defend themselves?
Yeah, go ahead and address that.
This is an important issue, and I think a lot of times it's skewing. It's a skewed perspective, because it is true that Israel is more armed and Israel has a much better military capability. Its infrastructure is extremely advanced, but that doesn't put Israel in the wrong. And you're right. Just because we're better armed, because we have technology, doesn't mean that we're not the victim here. Because it doesn't take a lot to go and build a bomb and to go into a mall and blow it up. It doesn't. And that's the problem. Israel's fight is not with an organized military. Israel's fight is with a terrorist organization. and you can't fight a terrorist organization the way you fight an army, because a terrorist organization a lot of times hides behind the term civilian, and that's why a lot of times you hear American news sites, they don't refer to terrorists necessarily as combatant. Sorry, something's wrong with my computer, and it's misleading. And just because another country has the upper hand in a war doesn't mean that it's in the wrong.
Right. No, and I mean, there's definitely, ultimately, from listening to a lot of different Israelis and Palestinians, there is wrong to be delegated to each, but it's just very interesting to put into perspective a lot of these different these points, which such as the military size and then being a terrorist organization, the justice system. It's very interesting to dig deeper into this conflict than just looking at it from the outside, because there are a lot of, I mean, at least I think Vonvo is discovering that there are a lot of different flaws in Israel's system. There are a lot of things that aren't getting reported, and there are a lot of things that Palestinians are doing, with, like the story that you just mentioned before, which never, ultimately never probably got played throughout the media, at least here in the States, because you said it got reported wrongfully. So ultimately, then, Mark, why don't we hear a little bit about what then some of your solutions would be? How would you approach this situation? How, hearing what I've shared with you that this individual Omar said to us, what would you say to Netanyahu as grounds for finding some sort of peace?
I think over the past 15, 20 years, Israel's done a lot to make this better. I mean, if you look through the history of nationalistic conflicts, this is the only time in recorded history where the victors sue for peace and the conquered sue for reparations. It's the only time in history where it's happened. And I think, I'm proud to be part of a nation that so strongly desires peace, enough to give away land. And I think you'll find, and I know this personally, that most Israelis would be willing to give up land in exchange for peace. The problem is they don't think it's possible. So I think it's now for the Palestinians to prove themselves. They need to find a nationalistic maturity to be able to have concessions, and once we see that they're capable of governing themselves with efficiency, once we see that, then I don't object to giving away land.
Right. Okay. It looks like Omar is trying to join this discussion, and I'm assuming his microphone will work this time as well as it did before. So let's just see if he loads up, and then we can have him chime in here. Omar, are you there? Omar, are you there? Mark, do you hear Omar?
No, I don't.
Hey.
Omar, are you there? I thought I just heard him for a second. Omar, do you hear me? Omar. Oh, there you go. There's a picture. Hold on one second. Omar, do you hear me? We see you vaguely. Oh, there he goes. Pop back out. Okay. No problem. Hopefully he'll be able to jump back in here. So let's see. Any other things from the? Well, we were just talking about solutions, correct?
Hello?
Yeah. Do you hear me, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just discussing solutions. What do you say about, individuals what do you say what is your answer to people on the Palestinian end who say that, although the UN granted Israel the right to create its country, create a state, they evicted, plenty of people out of their homes, drove them out of their homes, militarily back, I guess, they're referring to 1948. What's your response to that?
Well, the 1948 war was a different story. They weren't kicking people out of their homes they were doing that, and yes, it did happen, but they were doing that for military reasons. I mean, if you there's a town called Gilo, which is at the entrance of Yerushalayim, and it was a civilian. It was a town, not a military base, and they were firing mortars at Israeli troops from that town. And as a result, the town was cleared, and they had good reason to do it. And sometime, and I don't know if that was true for every single case, but there are refugees, and they once there is a homeland for the Palestinians, which at this point I looks a little grim, and it looks grim not because of what Israel's doing. It looks grim because of the way the Palestinians are trying to go about it. Not the Palestinians, the Palestinian leadership is trying to go about it. And once there is a stable state of Palestine that wants peace, I see no objection to letting them return to this new state.
Right. Okay, now let's see if Omar is able to get back in touch here. 1 second. Let's see. Nope. I don't know what happened. I'm not sure what's going on with him on his end. But, so you're saying that, do you not see any blame at all on behalf of the Israeli government in their treatment of, the Palestinian people? And let's take out potentially, the idea that there are, terrorists within Hamas that are, performing extremist actions. I mean, ultimately, some of the living conditions that these Palestinian people are telling me they're living under, it doesn't seem, like the most practical way and the most ideal way of living. So, do you not see any blame to assign towards the Israeli government? Do you think their system is perfect?
I mean, obviously the system's not perfect. There's always room for improvement. But I'd like to address something you just said about the living conditions of the Palestinians in Israel, and I'd like to reaffirm the fact that in Israel, it's the only place in the world where like for instance, Israeli Arabs, right? It's the only place in the world where they have rights, where women are allowed to pursue careers, where they're allowed to be educated, where they're not dominated by a masculine society, and a lot, like all the Arabs in Gaza, their electricity, their power is coming from Israel. There are municipal services such as the fact that they have access to clean water, the fact that they have ways to deal with waste. That's entirely an Israeli, a Jewish improvement region. And before that, and before Israel was here, the quality of life for the Arabs wasn't any better at all.
Right.
In fact, it was quite a bit worse.
Yep.
Can you hear me, Max?
Yes. Hi, Omar.
In the Middle East. Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, Max. I will just fix the cam a little.
Yeah. We can. Omar, are you still there?
I don't know.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
So let's
trying to fix the cam here.
Yeah, but we could stick with audio if you'd like. I'd rather have you just come in with audio and not video if it's possible.
It is possible. It is possible, Max.
Okay, great. So have you heard any of the points that Mark's been making? I know you've been coming in and out of the room.
Unfortunately, I didn't hear anything. I just heard that Mark said some unlogical points. I know. Can you tell me what did he say exactly?
Yeah, so in the most recent part of our conversation with Mark right now, he's been talking about how, in terms of the living conditions of Palestinians, one, water and electricity and municipal services that's supplied by the Israeli government, and then in terms of the way, women are treated inside of Palestine. It's one country of very few, or if any, that don't allow for a masculine dominated society. Do you want to make any counter arguments to those points, Omar?
Masculine dominated society, the Palestinian society, you mean?
Yeah, well, he's saying that in Palestine it's not. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I'm saying that in Israel,
Speak up,
women
Mark.
are treated
I want to
equally.
hear what you're saying.
Hello?
Do you hear him, Omar?
Can you hear me?
I don't.
Omar, do you hear Mark or no?
No, I don't hear your voice on.
Okay, Mark, would you mind clicking exit Vonvo and then come back into the room, and then Omar should be able to hear you?
Wait, what do you want me to do?
Omar's saying that he can't hear you, so a lot of the times when that happens, if you just click exit Vonvo, you'll leave the room, and then you'll come back in by just joining it again. He'll probably be able to hear your voice at that point.
All right.
Of course, I have no problem. Be right back.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, Mark, try that. Let's see if that works. Just click exit Vonvo. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And, oh no, what happened to Omar? Hey, Mark.
Hello?
Hey, Mark, 1 second. I think Omar might have thought that I asked him to do that as well, so let's just let him come back in the room.
Oh, okay.
I thought I said, just you, but 1 second. Let's see. Now, Mark, I mean, just as we're waiting for Omar to come back in here, if you were to, why don't you give us a sense of, are the, Omar is from Palestine, from the West Bank. Do you have any Arab friends, Palestinian friends, inside of Israel? And would this be like the first time that you're speaking with a Palestinian directly about their living conditions in this situation?
Oh no, not at all. I mean, I have friends who are Palestinian, and I go to class with them. Although we tend to avoid politics because we'd rather we have to be we have to live in close proximity to each other, and we may have different views, and we leave politics out of our friendships for obvious reasons.
Right. Rim wanted to know, where do you live and where were you born?
Where did I live and where was it? Well, right now I'm living in Israel, and I'm studying at university here to become an environmental engineer, and I was born in the United States.
Okay, great. And so you're in school right now, so you're in your early 20s or late teens?
Early 20s, yeah.
Okay. And so, I mean, ultimately, the idea, and I see an individual named Jihad who is here, and Jihad was participating in one of our conversations last weekend, and he's also from the West Bank, I believe. Jihad, if you want to join, that would be great. We'd love to have you in. Did you serve in the IDF, Mark, or you're just simply studying there, right?
No, I have not studied. I have not served in the IDF. Although I live here, so I know uncountable numbers of people who have.
Right. And so I guess then, like, an interesting point just to, like, throw out there, you came from America, and once again, on Vonvo, we're trying to just expose all, opinions and, allow people to formulate their own conclusions. So, I mean, let's just bring up a very simple example of, present day. You're in Israel right now. You're studying as, an American student studying in Israel. And Omar has been living in Palestine his entire life, in the West Bank. And he says that he hasn't been to Jerusalem for 11 years. You could probably go to Jerusalem tomorrow. Omar, according to him, he's not an extremist. He's just a regular 25-year-old individual. What do you believe gives you the right to go and travel inside of Israel right now freely that doesn't allow Omar to do the same?
Hello?
Mark, did you hear that question?
Hello?
Mark,
Yes, I did.
Did you hear that question?
Okay. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine now. Do you want to respond to that example, that real-life
Yes.
example?
First of all, when an Israeli soldier is indoctrinated into the Israeli army for the first time, they bring him to Yerushalayim, him or her to Jerusalem. And they do that because many Israelis who live all over the country have never been to Yerushalayim in their entire lives, in 18 years. And so for someone to say that they've not been to Yerushalayim, for 10 years, however many years you said before, doesn't mean necessarily that they couldn't have done. I don't know his personal situation, obviously. I'm sure he's being honest.
So the personal...
But I'm going to school right now with a Palestinian who's not Israeli who lives in Yerushalayim. So
Right.
I don't really know enough about his specific situation to make a comment. But with regards to traveling around Israel, why I can and other people can't necessarily, I'd say that generally if you look at your average Joe Schmo Jewish guy has no intention and would be horrified of taking someone's life unless that's necessary. And there isn't a group among Israelis who want to destroy lives. And there is a group, however small, of Palestinians who wish to do that. And I think restricting travel and making those security borders I know it has prevented attacks. And I'm okay with restricting someone else's travel to save lives. I'm okay with doing that. It's unfortunately necessary, and it's a shame that it's necessary, but it is necessary.
Okay, so we might have Omar in here. Omar, do you hear me?
I can't hear anymore. Are you done, Mark?
I hear you, Omar. Mark, do you hear Omar?
X? Anyone?
Yes.
Yes, I
do hear him.
Yes,
although
yes.
I just lost his image.
That's okay. Do we hear each other? Mark, do you hear Omar? Omar, do you hear Mark?
Omar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. I think just ignore your camera because
Yeah.
the important context of the discussion is in the words, not in the visual,
That's right.
Yeah, Omar, I'm sure you're beautiful, but we got to get the audio in.
So, do you have any questions, Max or Mark? Do you have a specific question?
Yeah, so, I mean, we were just discussing, the idea behind Mark being able to travel, to Jerusalem. He's a student right now studying in Israel from America, and, he being able to travel freely, and, you...
Max?
Yes. Omar, do you hear me? Omar, do you hear me? Omar, are you there? Yeah, unfortunately, Mark, our site is very young, and we've yet to perfect it, but it will be in time. Mark, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What I was going to say then, just quickly, Mark, I mean, going back to the question that I just asked you before, I'd like to just hear like maybe a direct answer to the question of, Omar is in the West Bank, and he's saying he has no he has no problems with Jews. He has no problems with Jews living in Israel. Knowing that that's Omar's situation, that's how he feels, and he's not an extremist. Do you think it's right, yes or no, to restrict him from traveling freely throughout the country?
Him as an individual?
Yes.
Meaning that there weren't greater social issues at hand. Meaning that then yeah, I think it would be fine for him to travel over the country. But unfortunately, he's one of millions of individuals, and at some point they're putting systems in place, security checks that are designed to keep Israeli citizens safe. And unfortunately, a system like that can never be perfect. It can't. And in an ideal world where we could, I don't like the whole idea of Big Brother, but let's say we could identify him specifically as an individual who means no harm, who has true business to conduct in Jerusalem, or whatever he wants to do, party, whatever, I don't care.
Right.
Then yeah, sure, he should be let through. But the infrastructure to do that doesn't exist.
Right. So now the question is if he is struggling to, you're saying that yeah, he should be allowed to. If he's, a perfectly normal individual just trying to have a daily life, there shouldn't be any restriction from him. So, and then you're saying that, the circumstances don't permit for him to be allowed to do it. Well, then my question to you would be, if Israel would make...
Well, see, I don't know if that's true.
Well, he said...
I do know people...
Okay, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
I do know people from the West Bank who travel to Yerushalayim on a daily basis, to and from Yerushalayim on a daily basis.
Right, but
I've taken what's it called in America where you stick your thumb out? Hitchhiked. I've hitchhiked from Yerushalayim to areas in the West Bank with Arabs before, and they've been let in and out. So I do know that individuals are let in and out. I don't know how that system works, but I do know that Israel tries to permit as many people to safely cross as possible.
Right now, there's a blue ID card that Palestinians are supposed to be able to have in order to, travel freely throughout the country. Do you think that Israel, for people like Omar, should be making the process to obtain one of those blue passport or ID cards a lot more effortless, or a lot more less restrictive, so that Omar can participate with a daily normal life, similar to yourself and some of these other Arab individuals you mentioned do?
Well, like I said, the problem isn't one of segregation. It's one of bureaucracy. It's one of what is capable with the support structure that Israel has. If you talk to any Israeli citizen, you'll know that Israeli bureaucracy is ridiculously complicated and hard to navigate, and it takes forever to get anything done. And that's been true since Israel's inception. And, unfortunately, bureaucracy is the best system that we have for maintaining, large operations, whether it be a government or a school or whatever. And there are inherent issues with bureaucracy that will remain until humanity is no more.
Right. Okay, very good. So Omar just mentioned to me that he's not, going to be able to come back on. We have a conversation coming on, shortly in the next few hours. We actually have more conversations scheduled throughout the day, Mark. I hope you enjoyed your experience on the site. I wish maybe some of the people who are watching this conversation would want to come in and participate, but it's not a big deal. We'd love to have you back, and I hope you enjoyed your first Vonvo experience, and ultimately it's this conflict as well as a lot of other things such as the war in Syria and a matter of different items that we're trying to address and give citizens the opportunity to help address and maybe make right, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, great. So Mark, obviously to sign in, we have your email address. We'll be sending out weekly updates. If you want to like our Facebook page, that would be great, so we can give you any updates relating to our company and every schedule Vonvo we have that we've been updating throughout the day. And we'd love to, it's just the Vonvo Facebook page. And, we'll definitely be in touch, and we hope to have you back on again.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Thanks so much.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.